Avowed came out, I don't know, a week ago at this point, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys. This is some of the most genuine, easily earned fun that I've had in a video game in a very long time. And I have a feeling, unfortunately, that a lot of people aren't gonna give Avowed the time of day. I have a feeling this game runs the risk of not reaching an audience that I strongly feel it deserves. So in this video, I wanna cover 3 of the main reasons why I'm loving Avowed and why I think you might as well. I released a first impressions review the day early access started. You should go check out that video if you haven't already. If there's an aspect of this game, good or bad, that I don't cover here, chances are I cover it there. But full transparency, I have not beaten this game yet. I honestly haven't seen that much past the first couple of areas. I have a lot of hours in already, but I'm taking my time. I'm enjoying the journey, but still, as I share my thoughts with you guys, keep in mind I haven't seen the credits roll. But anyway, I'm gonna jump into the video. I'm gonna show you guys some raw gameplay, but before I do that, subscribe if you haven't already. If you're new here, I talk about video games all the time on this channel. I do day 1 reviews. I do other video game discussions a lot like this one. I just love sharing my passion of video games, and I hope you guys join me. I'm coming for you. The first thing I want to talk about, one of the main reasons why I think Avowed is head and shoulders above most of its current RPG peers, is the writing. The writing in this game is actually pretty good, which unfortunately seems to be a rare thing in games these days. One of the biggest, most fundamental flaws in so many modern RPGs and video games in general is piss poor writing. And I think a lot of people don't fully realize or fully appreciate how important the writing is to a game like this. Not just for the main story, but for all the side content as well, and all the small details. Again, I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record here if you've watched some of my previous videos, but Dragon Age the Veilguard had some very noticeable flaws when it came to the gameplay, the map, and all the technical aspects, but it's worse in. The biggest nail in its coffin was by far the writing. It was stale, it was soulless, it was cringe-inducing, it was borderline insulting to the player. The story wasn't interesting, the characters sucked ass, and dialogue was like the audible version of soaking white line notebook paper in tap water and then chewing on it while someone holds a jar of mayonnaise to your nose. And since the writing was awful, it made it so I was unable to care about what I was doing and the characters that surrounded me. The same can be said for a lot of other recent RPGs as well, not to the extent of Dragon Age the Veilguard, but still, Star Wars Outlaws would have been a lot better if the narrative and the writing wasn't so mid. Again, same with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and even though I liked it, I know a lot of people didn't care for Starfield's story as well, which I totally get, but look back at some of the best RPGs or open world games of the past couple decades. Fallout 3, The Witcher 3, Cyberpunk 2077, Far Cry 3, peak Assassin's Creed games, just to name a few. On paper, in terms of gameplay and level design, they aren't that different from the failures of recent years. Go here, collect the item, gather the resources, upgrade your weapon, stealth kill this guy, or talk it out, say a nice thing, or be a douchebag. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying, but I think you get my point. In a lot of ways, there's a very fine line between the games we consider classics and the games of today that get shit on and left to rot as soon as they're released. And most of the time, that fine line is determined by the writing. Why are we going there to collect the item? Why are we choosing to be stealthy? Why would we say some mean thing over something friendly? Do the choices that we make even matter? And for me, Avowed makes me care about all of those reasons why. And I can't remember the last time that was the case, that I cared this much about the why in a game of this genre specifically. But don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna lie to you This isn't The Witcher 3 levels of storytelling and characterization. This isn't classic Fallout levels of dialogue options and consequences. But regardless, the writing feels like it has heart. It feels like it cares about being a story worth telling and creating characters that aren't just absolutely miserable to be around. And even the writing in the smaller moments feel like there was effort put in there as well. Early on in the game, I just happened upon a graveyard and I read some of the inscriptions on the headstones and I thought to myself, damn, those are well written. I'm glad I read that. That added to the experience for me. So much so I took 5 to 10 minutes to read all the other graves that I could. Even when you talk to random NPCs, they feel like they have personality. They remember stuff you've done. They remember past interactions you had together, where so many games these days just feel like the writing was produced by AI, just absolutely soulless. This game feels like it was not only written by human writers, but human writers who are actually good at their job. If I read headstones in Dragon Age the Veilguard, I guarantee you I would have given up after the first one, and then I would have forgot I read them 10 seconds later. It's more often than not that I'm just bored out of my mind when I'm playing newer games. More often than not that I couldn't care less about the main story, and I find myself just clicking my way through a conversation, praying for it to end so I can do my ears a favor and just stop listening to the tuna fish flavored toothpaste that passes as writing these days. Again, that's not the case in Avowed. These conversations had me hooked. They have me caring about the quests and the characters, and it makes me actually enjoy being in this world, which is a great feeling after so many disappointments in the RPG genre recently. And the main story so far actually has me interested as well. But again, it's not phenomenal, mind you. I'm not gonna lie and say this is Silent Hill 2 levels of impactfulness, but again, I'm actually interested in the main narrative to the point where I actually think about it when I'm not playing. That doesn't happen often anymore, and the writing for the companions is actually winning me over as well. I said in my original review that I found the companions to be a little on the boring side, but now after putting in quite a few more hours, I like them. At least the ones I've met. They have personalities that don't annoy the shit out of me. I like conversing with them. I like hearing what they have to say. I like having them be by my side. But now, just to balance things out, I don't want it to feel like I'm just blindly glazing over here, but so far the game can be a little disappointing, just a little bit in terms of big decision making. I'm over 20 hours in and I haven't had to make a tough decision yet, but I remember when I played the Outer Worlds, I'm pretty sure you have to make a pretty difficult decision within the first few hours of gameplay. But with that being said, even though I'm over 20 hours in, I haven't done that many main story quests. I've mostly been doing all the side quests and just exploring, but still, even in the side quests, there doesn't seem to be that many options on how to handle things. Oftentimes, dialogue trees boil down to attack them, or diffuse the situation, or a bribe option will be thrown in every now and then. But besides that, dialogue trees are pretty extensive. You can have long conversations even with some of the most random NPCs, and conversations can go down a wide variety of different talking points, which I do love. But in terms of dialogue options that actually change the game and the quests and your character, I am a little underwhelmed so far. But still, the dialogue options, the actual technical writing of all that dialogue is better than most games these days. And again, the writing just makes me care about this world. And speaking of that, let's get into my second reason, and that's the world and how much I love looking at it and how much I like exploring it.
You ungrateful nitwit! Once I'm done with the Outlander, I'm coming after you.
Good.
Is that all you got?
I genuinely don't remember the last time I found a game world to be this charming in a recent game, but this is a perfect example of a game world that's about substance over size. A perfect example of how handcrafted worlds, when done properly, elevate everything else a game has to offer. Again, I'm going to use Dragon Age the Veilguard and Star Wars Outlaws as examples. I know, it might be getting old at this point, but they are the two most recent examples of games that had an insane amount of potential, but failed to capitalize due to laziness and poor design. And on top of that, they were two of my top 3 most anticipated games of last year. But anyway, in a lot of ways, the maps in Star Wars Outlaws looked pretty for sure. And there were moments sprinkled throughout the game that a location was memorable, but the maps as a whole didn't really provide anything of substance. You could ride around on your speeder, then hop off it randomly, and 9 out of 10 times there'll be absolutely nothing of interest to see or do within a sizable radius, just grass or sand, and maybe a copy and paste Imperial base that you've already seen half a dozen times already, and the layout of the towns or the cities or the hubs, whatever you want to call them, they left a lot to be desired. And don't even get me started on the maps of Dragon Age the Veilguard. They were a clusterfuck to navigate and didn't make any logical sense in terms of their design, but Avowed's world, so far, from what I've played, is again just charming as hell, cozy as fuck. I've never once regretted looking around or going off the beaten path. I never once felt like I was wasting my time. Everywhere I looked, my eyes found something to appreciate. And for the record, open area games are often my least favorite, generally speaking. I love a whole bunch of linear games, and I love a whole bunch of open world games, but more often than not, open world games like Avowed never really win me over. More often than not, they come across to me like half-assed, half measures, where the studio might not have the resources or might be too lazy to create an actual open world, but they don't want to make a linear game because they want to put freedom to explore in all of their marketing. And again, I know this is probably just a me thing, a personal preference thing, but Avowed is the rare instance where the open area game design works really, really well. In fact, the game feels better for it. In my experience, the map has, again, barely any blank space. Again, everywhere you look, there's something pretty to behold, or a secret to find out, or a fun combat encounter. It just works for me on so many different levels. And I know I said this in my initial review, but I'm gonna double down on it here. The overall tone and vibe of this world reminds me so much of The Legend of Zelda and the Fable franchises. Again, I'm not saying Avowed is a perfect match to those games. It's not like you told me you loved Demon Souls, so I hand you Dark Souls to play afterwards. Avowed just evokes the same kind of charm, tone, and atmosphere, just built upon the foundation of an Obsidian RPG. It reminds me specifically of the Fable franchise, though, oddly enough, which is, by the way, another example of how a game can be elevated by nailing a specific mood, as opposed to trying to be the biggest thing or the most innovative thing, because I don't think anyone is going to say that Fable is the most immersive gaming world. I don't think anyone is going to say Fable has the best quest designs either, but people love spending time in that game nonetheless because of the tone, because of the mood, and the whimsical, fantastical, lighthearted elements. And again, those games don't have the most shit to do, but the stuff that it does have to do feel impactful and memorable. And I think the exact same thing can be said for Avowed. The final praise I have for Avowed that I want to highlight in this video is how fun I find the combat to be. In games like this, the combat is often clunky and a little awkward, at least in my experience. Even going back to some RPG classics of the mid to late 2000s, oftentimes you could tell the focus was more on storytelling and exploration, and the combat was just serviceable. It was enough to get the job done. I think Bethesda RPGs are a prime example of this. Hell, even The Witcher 3, which is arguably my favorite video game of all time, by the way. It doesn't have bad combat by any means, but it didn't seem to be the primary focus of CD Projekt Red when they were developing that game, you know what I mean? But I genuinely find Avowed's combat to be some of the funnest in any Western RPG style game that I've played before. All the weapons feel great to use, long range, two-handed, melee, and dual wielding. Enemies are just difficult enough. Most of the time they never feel like a cakewalk, but they aren't insanely difficult either. There's been times where I would get my ass handed to me by a certain enemy over and over and over, but it never felt unfair or unfun, and I would buckle down, get good, and eventually I would win by changing up my strategy or my gear or whatever, and it felt rewarding. It felt like the perfect balance of difficulty for me. But on the flip side, there's been a few times here and there where it was clear that I was underleveled, underpowered, that I got myself into a fight that I just couldn't win, so I had to go find resources to level up my gear or do some bounties to earn coin to buy better stuff. And even that never felt annoying. It never felt like a pain in the ass, which again is rare. There's been so many times in games that you hit that wall, that artificial difficulty barrier designed to make you grind. And oftentimes it just sucks. It's not fun. Leveling up is tedious and it kills all of the momentum. Again, that's not the case for me in Avowed. Leveling up and gearing up is simple and easy, but it's also rewarding and it feels effective, and it requires you to actually work for it, so it also doesn't feel like you're just getting level ups handed to you for no reason. And I know I'm kind of scatterbrained right now, but the combat encounters in this game are just fun, not just with the moment-to-moment combat with your weapons, but skills are pretty cool as well. Not to mention your companions and their abilities, they always come in clutch. There's been so many moments already where a combat encounter just felt cinematic, and not because it was trying to, but because it was just intense and adrenaline inducing. And in terms of pure combat, this is the most fun I've had in a while, and I don't say that lightly. For example, another big Xbox exclusive that came out a few months ago was Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, and I really loved that game. You can go watch my 2 reviews for it. It was really high on my Game of the Year list last year, but combat, to me, in my opinion, felt like it left a lot to be desired. It didn't come across as impactful as I feel like they wanted it to, and in my opinion, it's the aspect of that game that needs to be improved the most for a hopeful potential sequel.
Hold it. Not looking good. I can't believe they're dead.
But yeah, obviously, so far, I'm really loving Avowed. For all the reasons I just stated and more, I think it's well worth playing. But at the same time, I don't want to oversell this game for you. It's not going to be the next big thing. It's not overly innovative. This isn't going to be this year's version of Baldur's Gate 3. It's not going to raise the bar that The Witcher 3 did in 2015. All things considered, Avowed is a simple game. But in this instance, that works to its benefit. I think a lot of gamers might not give Avowed the time of day because it's not the next big thing to move the genre forward, which I'm not saying is completely unreasonable. There's so many games coming out, so much competition, and we only have so many hours in a day to game, but at the same time, I think a lot of people forget how refreshing a simplified, stripped down approach can be to a video game. Like, let's talk about other industries for a second. Let's talk about the music industry. How many times has a band or an artist released an album or a song and it was praised for going back to its roots or for being stripped down? How many times have you heard someone say, yeah, this song is awesome because it sounds like an old school version of this musical artist's sound? Or even in the film industry, there's been critically acclaimed directors that people love who start falling out of touch with what originally resonated with people. And then eventually they'll start releasing flop after flop, but then at some point they release a film that goes back to their roots and everyone just loses their shit and they love it. And they're reminded about how the way things used to be in a lot of ways are far better than they are now. That's how I feel about Avowed. Again, the game's not dumbed down or too simple. It just doesn't bite off more than it can chew. It doesn't overpromise and underdeliver. It just focuses on the core pillars: the writing, the world, the gameplay, and in turn it has successfully, in my opinion, made those pillars far stronger than the vast majority of its modern competitors. But yeah, so far I'm enjoying Avowed more than Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I'm enjoying it more than Stalker 2, Hearts of Chernobyl, and I praised these games. I really like these games. Avowed absolutely shits all over Star Wars Outlaws and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora and Dragon Age the Veilguard. And even though I liked these games, I'm liking Avowed more than Black Myth Wukong, more than The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and even more than Starfield, which I know that's a low bar for a lot of people. I'm well aware of that, but for me, I really liked Starfield a lot. But again, I want to make it clear, I have not beaten Avowed. There's a very realistic possibility that my opinion on this game could sour the more that I play it. And if that happens, I will absolutely make another video to say as much. I'll start beef with myself. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Avowed, but enough with me talking. I want to hear from you guys. Have you played Avowed? If you have, let me know what you're thinking about it in the comments down below. Are you enjoying it as much as I am? Are you liking it but not as much? Did you try it and you didn't like it? Or do you plan to skip this game entirely? Either way, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your opinions in the comments down below. Once again, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.
Let's see what you got. Hold it. Look. Yeah.